Hello, and welcome to Cycling on Cycling, the world's first podcast about cycling, and while I'm riding a bike. So, you see all these, we've all seen, there's probably a million cycling podcasts. How many of them are doing it while they're cycling? Half these guys don't even know if they can ride a bike. Not to be rude, but today's the first episode. We're going to be previewing the upcoming UCI World Tour cycling tour. So, I'm going to give you a quick preview of the schedule, what races we got coming up, transfer news, all the teams, and my predictions for 3 Grand Tours, which are coming up this season. So, schedule this year, of course, it'll be a little condensed due to there's this thing called coronavirus, and it's some global pandemic. So there's going to be a lot more races, and half the time, the same amount of races in half the time, but, if you zoom in, it's kind of like more races, for us cycling fans. We got the first one-day race coming up here, August 1st, in Italy, and then we kick off with the Tour de Polonia, I believe August 5th through the 9th. And then we'll have Tour de France at the end of August, going into September for 3 weeks. Bit of a break till the Giro d'Italia, running for most of October, and then finishing with the Vuelta at the end of October into November. So, just give a quick run through of just the UCI World Tour setup and the teams we got competing this year. We got a couple of new teams that just moved up a level from Pro Continental up to the UCI World Tour. And we'll start in alphabetical order. How does that sound? So, first team we're going to be previewing is AG2R La Mondiale. They're a French team. And most of their riders are French also. And we're talking, this is a middle-of-the-pack team. Not the star power, not the money that some of these other teams have. Certainly not the depth. But, we still get a couple of real cyclists on this team, starting with Romain Bardet. Just a, heck of a climber. He ended up winning the King of the Mountains at last year's Tour de France, winning that coveted polka dot jersey. And it'll be real interesting for them this year with this condensed schedule. I think we're going to have a lot of teams putting in the big guns for the Tour in August, and then the Vuelta at the end of October. I don't know how many teams are going to be sending their best riders to the Giro, just based on how the schedule ends up working out. So I really think that Bardet, he said that, he's not racing Tour de France this year. He's going to focus on the Giro, and I think if the team give him enough firepower to help him along, we could be looking at a surprise winner of the Giro, or at least a podium. Okay, moving on. Next we got Astana. Obviously named after the former capital of Kazakhstan. It's a Kazakh team. Of course, the capital has been renamed Nur Sultan after former President Nur Sultan Nazarbayev. A bit of a controversial team. General manager, former cyclist. They've had, I believe, 2 doping-related suspensions. And this is a team that's had doping issues in the past, but they've been clean about the last 5 years. And they got some good riders there. We're not talking about a top-of-the-line team, but again, another middle of the pack. Maybe lacking some depth. A lot of their rosters filled out with, Kazakh riders. But, you never know. I'm sure they got somebody on that team. Yeah. Can't think of anyone, but next up we got a German team. Now, we got Team Bahrain. Of course, centered in Bahrain. But a really international driver pool they got. And a new sponsor, McLaren. Of course, McLaren, they make cars. So, don't really know why they're sponsoring a bike team. But at least that's what I thought. And then I remembered, the Wright brothers, before they made planes, they used to make like those bikes with one really big wheel. Next up, we got one of my favorites, Team Bora Hansgrohe of Germany. Middle of the pack team, kind of a recent up and coming team. But on roster, they got just the best sprinter in the world, for my money. And that's, of course, the Slovak Peter Sagan. Sagan, just an absolute monster of a man. 6'8", 280 pounds of pure muscle in his thighs. And he can sprint like the wind. This is a guy who's won points classifications at the Tour de France something like 7 times. It has done the same at the Giro and the Vuelta. So, maybe not a lot of depth on this team. They're not going to be challenging for GC in any of the Grand Tours, but you better expect to see Sagan wearing the green shirt in France in a few weeks. Okay. Next up, we got the Polish team, CCC. A little bit underwhelming. They had a lot of resources at a time, and they haven't really been able to translate that into too many wins. Popular team, they wear that distinctive orange racing shirt that segment fans around the world now. But lack a bit of star power. Sorry, dogs just ran at me. Shut up. Poland. Next up, we got Cofidis, French team. These guys are back markers for the most part. They might have, a couple guys at the top of the team. A couple good climbers. A couple of guys that can compete in these one-day races. But I don't see him winning any classics. I don't see him sniffing GC in any of these Grand Tours. There's another, I think, a French team, very European flair to them. one of the classic French teams, really, in that distinctive red and white strip. But, they're not necessarily reaching the same heights as maybe we were accustomed to with Cofidis, in the past. No really standout riders that I can really think of at the moment. Then we come to, our first really big team, the Belgian Deceuninck Quick-Step. If you want firepower and depth, this is a team that grew organically. They're not Team Ineos, who we'll talk about later, who just had a huge inflection of cash. We're talking, smart strategy, developing good riders, and boy, they have a really good lineup, in my opinion, led by the star man of last year, Julian Alaphilippe, who, of course, we all remember wearing that yellow jersey in France for 2 weeks before losing it out at the end to Ineos. But yeah, just what a climber he is, and even developing into, in my opinion, a little bit more of an all-rounder. But this is a guy who's had success in the mountains in France, and really a guy that can lead your team, in my opinion, even if, maybe they don't have quite the firepower in the Grand Tours as Ineos. If you're looking at single-day races or, some of the classics, Deceuninck is gonna clean up. Quick step. So yeah, a really fun team. I would say the best all-round team, even if in the Grand Tours, Tour de France, Vuelta, the Giro. They probably, because they don't put all their resources into those races like a couple of the other teams, Jumbo-Visma, for example, it's going to be an uphill climb for them to make podium at some of these races. But when we're talking about single-day races, they have some punchers on that team. Next team, I believe, is the Americans. In the pink shirts, of course, the distinctive pink shirts, Team Education First, formerly known as EF Education First. This is another middle-of-the-pack team, but they got some climbers. They can put some good rides together. We can start by talking about Rigoberto Urán. Of course, he's got a second in a Grand Tour to his name, 2017. And, they're a solid team, but again, they won't have the firepower. Of course, if TJ Van Garderen can finish a Grand Prix, I think we'd all be pretty happy. And Neilson Powless, of course, another young American who they nabbed from Team Jumbo-Visma. Just a really good young climber who really got a lot of potential. If you're asking me. I think next we got one of the new teams, and that's Team Israel. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Team Israel this year. They just, I know they've got, they signed Dan Martin, but they just, this year I think it's going to be an uphill battle. Of course, the big news with Team Israel, isn't this year. It's, the signing of Chris Froome for next year. Chris Froome, of course, multiple times Tour de France winner with Team Ineos, then Team Sky. Obviously he's getting up there. He had that horrific injury at the Criterium de Dauphiné last year, which some people thought could end his career. And certainly I think Ineos aren't willing to put their faith in him anymore after that. But Team Israel, really nothing to lose with their current setup. They a risk like that could really pay off for them in the future. But again, that's looking towards next year. So I don't expect to see a lot of wins and one-day races, stage races. And I really think it'll be a tough season for them this season. I expect them to struggle, as might be expected for a team just moving up that step from Pro Continental. But that's to be expected. Let's talk about, of course, Team Ineos. Really, these guys are Team Moneybags in the ECI World Tour Cycling. Do I even have to list some of their high-profile names? Geraint Thomas. I mentioned Chris Froome, who his role is still to be determined this year. And of course, last year's Tour de France winner, the brilliant Colombian Egan Bernal. I don't think I'm allowed to go this way. This hill's gonna suck, so bear with me here, folks. Next team, they're one of my favorite teams, maybe my favorite team. We know them as the Bumblebees. I don't think anyone called them that. But of course, Team Jumbo-Visma from the Netherlands. And in my opinion, this is the team that's going to be challenging Ineos for these Grand Tours. Ineos, of course, I kind of failed to mention in my description of them, they focus a lot of their resources on these big, 3-week races, the ones I've mentioned, the Giro d'Italia, the Volta a España, Tour de France. And, maybe, they take a little bit of their resources away from some of these one-day races or these, cobble races. And Jumbo-Visma, I think, could be kind of heading that same way. I really think that, the depth we saw at the Vuelta and at the Tour de France with Kruijswijk and Primož Roglic, just how strong they can be. Really, what a performance at the Vuelta. Shout out to Sepp Kuss, getting his first stage win, Go Buffs. But I really see Jumbo-Visma closing the gap here relatively soon. This year, I see, I could see a second at the Tour de France. I would still, Ineos are going to be prohibitive favorites until something changes. But, I think Roglic can really make a run when you look at some of those other guys that they have. Of course, Mike Teunissen last year had the yellow jersey for the beginning of the race. They're a great time trial team. So, be on the lookout for Jumbo-Visma. I'm kind of losing the order I'm supposed to go in here, but I would say next, let's take a look at Lotto Soudal. We're getting back to some of these midfield teams. Stand out here, I think it's got to be the young Australian Caleb Ewan. This guy, anybody can. If anybody can challenge Peter Sagan coming up in the future, it's got to be Caleb Ewan. This dude's got 2 Christmas hams for thighs. and not to mention a charming smile. Alright, Mitchelton Scott. That's a team, not a person. I think they're from Australia. Of course, they got the Yates twins. Simon won a welter or something a couple years ago. Movistar, one of the classic cycling teams in their blue and white. Of course, they've always had a distinctive Spanish flair, really dominated by Spanish riders, and then, now more, South American riders at the top. Of course, Nairo Quintana, the great climber, no longer on the team. He moved down to UCI Pro Continental, I believe. This was one of the more interesting teams last year, with just the amount of drama. This is a team that had a lot of number ones. Talking Nairo Quintana, Alejandro Valverde, and even Mikel Landa, to an extent, who, hopefully will get some opportunities, at his new team, which is, one of the new teams, or he's on a team, new for him. Can't forget about Mikel Landa. Like I said, Miguel Lopez or something like that. He's a 13-year-old. Next up, let's see. Anything stands out. Trek Segafredo. I'm not going in alphabetical anymore. I don't even know how many teams I've done. Another American team. They got some, I think, Vincenzo Nibali, maybe? Is he on that team? I'm not, it's an American team. So if you think about that, it's there's definitely more teams. I think there's a NTT Pro team, South African team. They're trash. They're like the worst team. I don't even know what colors they wear. They don't even have Daryl Impey on that team. How are you going to have a good South African team without Daryl Impey? Sunweb. I think they're a German team. They wear like this kind of orangish red-orange, and red, like color. And they have some, they'll win some, maybe a race. I might forget. Anyway, it's going to be a great season of racing, for us fans of we love bikes. Get on the bike. I mean, I love being on the bike, and if you love bikes, it's gonna be good for that because we're gonna be racing. Well, I'm not, you're gonna be able to watch a lot of bike racing because it's kind of like there's more races, even though it's less time. Catch my breath a little bit here. So, if I got something wrong or I forgot something, feel free to, let me know. So I didn't get to the women's cycling today. I just, maybe if this episode gets 1,000 podcasts, if it gets 1,000 likes, I'll drop the women's preview. And I'll see you next. After the race in Italy and after the Tour de Polonia, we'll check back in. That was Cycling on Cycling with your host.